When you think about the heart of Filipino gaming culture in the late 90s and early 2000s, it's not a PlayStation. It's not a Nintendo Game Boy. It's a room with a bunch of monitors glowing in the dark, the smell of instant noodles in the air, the faint hum of CPU fans, and the clacking of keyboards that never seemed to rest. That was the PC Cafe. And for a whole generation of us, it was more than just a place to play. It was a community. It was an escape. It was home. Before we talk about what it felt like, we need to talk about where it came from. The concept of internet cafes wasn't born in the Philippines. It started in the mid 90s in places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and South Korea, where fast, cheap internet made gaming a shared public activity. Here in the Philippines, the earliest versions of PC cafes popped up around 1996 to 1998, right when internet access was still rare in homes. Computers were expensive, the internet was slow, and only a handful of people even knew what online meant. At first, these shops weren't even about gaming. They were for printing assignments, checking email, maybe the occasional Yahoo Messenger chat. A student might spend 20 pesos for an hour to finish a research paper or talk to a cousin abroad. But then, the games came in. Quake, Counter Strike, StarCraft, Ragnarok Online. Suddenly, those rows of beige towers weren't just office tools, they were portals to other worlds. And in true Pinoy fashion, the owners saw the demand and adapted fast. Shops that used to be internet access and printing services quietly became PC gaming stations. By the early 2000s, PC cafes were everywhere, from major cities to the smallest barangays. It didn't matter if the space was a big air conditioned shop with 50 units or a converted sari sari store with 5 computers jammed against the wall. As long as it had LAN, it had life. If you grew up in that era, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Stepping into a PC cafe felt like stepping into a completely different space from the outside world. Outside, the sun was blinding, the traffic was heavy. Inside, it was dim, cool, and buzzing with that mix of adrenaline and caffeine. The prices were cheap enough to make it an after school hangout. Some places charged 20 pesos an hour, others 15. And if you were a suke, you might even get an extra 30 minutes for free. Owners knew their regulars by name and sometimes by the specific seat you always chose. The games you played back then weren't just about entertainment, they were social glue. Counter Strike 1.3 wasn't just a shooter, it was a competition between barcadas, a way to settle arguments that had nothing to do with the game. Dota wasn't just a custom map in Warcraft 3, it was a friendship test. If you took Roshan without telling your teammates, expect real life side eye. In Ragnarok Online, that was the start of many great love stories, and also many heartbreaks. It wasn't unusual to see a row of friends yelling at each other across the cafe, not because they were angry, but because the game was intense. There was always that one guy who got way too emotional when he died, and the other guy who stayed completely quiet until he pulled off something insane. Here's the thing. For a lot of us, the PC cafe wasn't just a gaming spot. It was where life happened. It was where the shy kid could suddenly become a team leader in Counter Strike, shouting strategies like a general. It was where classmates who barely spoke in school would suddenly spend hours side by side building bases in Red Alert. It was where you'd meet people you never would have crossed paths with otherwise. Older players, younger kids, people from different schools, different neighborhoods. For some, it was a safe space. Home life might have been noisy, stressful, or even unsafe, but inside the cafe, you had control over your world, at least for the length of your 20 peso session. For others, it was their training ground. The reflexes, coordination, and communication skills honed in those matches, some of that carried over into real life. There's also a cultural thing here. Filipinos are naturally social, and PC cafes amplified that. Even though everyone had their own screen, we weren't isolated. We were together. You'd lean over to watch your friends game, give advice, or just roast them for a bad play. And if someone pulled off a ridiculous win, the whole cafe knew about it. If you close your eyes and think back, you can probably hear it. The sound of dozens of mice clicking, the headshot voice from Counter Strike, the music of Ragnarok floating above the hum of the fans, add in a constant background chatter. Rushby, Rushby! Pucha! Talaga ko! Last game na to, promise! It was never the last game. Kuya, pa-extend. 30 minutes lang. Boss! Yung pansit canton nga. Ulul! Mga bobo! And of course, the soundtrack wasn't complete without the occasional palod from the counter, followed by the printer starting up in the corner for some last-minute homework. Every PC cafe had its own signature fuel. In the bigger ones, you might have a proper snack bar with burgers and fries. In the smaller ones, it was more like instant everything. Instant noodles, instant coffee, instant iced tea. Some even sold chicheria and candy, perfect for eating with one hand while your other hand stayed on the mouse. There was something special about eating a steaming cup of Lucky Me pancit canton while waiting for your turn in Dota. The smell of that, mixed with the smell of plastic keyboards and dusty carpet, is burned into the memory of every 90s and 2000s kids who've ever gamed. But like all golden ages, this one didn't last forever. By the late 2000s, more and more households could afford their own computers. Internet speeds at home improved and broadband became cheaper. Then came the rise of handheld gaming and smartphones, which meant you could play anywhere. PC cafes didn't disappear overnight, but the crowds started thinning. The smaller neighborhood shops, the ones run by families, were often the first to go. The bigger ones tried to pivot, focusing on competitive gaming tournaments or high-end rigs, but even they felt the shift. The final blow for many came during the COVID-19 pandemic. With lockdowns, there was no foot traffic, and the already struggling shops had no choice but to close. For a lot of us, our home in the PC cafe world was gone without warning. Still, the legacy of the PC cafe lives on. Ask anyone who grew up in that era and their eyes light up instantly. They'll tell you about the time they won an entire cafe-wide Counter-Strike match by clutching a 1v5. Or the time their guild in Ragnarok dominated an entire server. Or the day they skipped class just to finish a raid, fully knowing their mom would be waiting with the slipper when they got home. And here's the truth. It wasn't just about the games. It was about the feeling of belonging. It was about having a space where you could show up, sit down, and instantly be part of something. That's what the PC Cafe gave us. A sense of place in a world that was just starting to get connected. It was messy, noisy, sweaty, sometimes smelly, but it was ours. Today, PC cafes have evolved. Some survive by catering to serious esports players with top-of-the-line rigs and fiber internet. Others live on in nostalgia cafes, where retro games are played on old hardware just for the vibes. But for most of us, the real PC cafe exists only in memory. And honestly, that's okay. Because every time you boot up an old copy of Counter-Strike, every time you hear the Ragnarok login music, you're back there. In that dim room, shoulder to shoulder with your friends, chasing one more win before your load runs out. And you remember, not just the games, not just the noise, but the people. The laughter, the connection. The PC Cafe wasn't just a place, it was a time. And we were lucky enough to be there. That's the story. That's the history. And that's the love letter. To the rooms that raised us, to the friendships that started with 1 hour lang po, and to the golden glow of a monitor in the dark. Because in the end, we didn't just grow up playing in PC cafes. We grew up because of them.